new language is there in italics. This has come to us from the Director of Guidance, and we've been waiting to get this one settled for a while. And then concussions and head injuries was a new policy, and again, you sent it back to us because on page 2 under coach's responsibility, I know the comment Mr. Lato made was, well, I'd rather err on the side of safety, and there shouldn't be any withholding of services, or we should do it as soon as possible. We, at our meeting, Peter Coffrin, our athletic director, came to the meeting, and he told us about the work that they've been doing for the last year. I described some of it in the minutes, and he suggested some revisions. We had a really good discussion. So on page 2, under coach's responsibility, the second paragraph is the addition to what you had seen before, and I think it addresses the points that you made the last time you saw this, and we are feeling confident with what the athletic director is doing, and this would apply to grades 6 to 12. Those are the grades that the district expends money for athletics. Are there questions on any of these proposed? Mr. Lato.
As I read it, if one were to ask the question, whose job is it to make the call? That's the coach's job. That's clear to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. I put on the agenda first deliberative session. It was wonderful to see the number of people there, and at that ballot vote, it totaled 524 people, which included the 2 votes that they couldn't count. So it's been many years since we had that number. I did not know if the board wanted to discuss anything that happened at first deliberative session, so I just put it on the agenda if you wanted to do so. Mr. Belbin?
Yes, I think it was very well attended, and I thank everybody for coming. It was a great satisfaction to see so many people there. The one thing that I think that we failed on, and I think it was our fault, I think it was very poor when we had voters sitting out in the bleachers in the gym when non-voters were sitting in the hall. I think that was something we've got to address in the future. That's very poor.
Okay.
That's the only thing I saw that was wrong with
the
it.
moderator prior to the meeting, and you are not allowed to segregate.
What?
You can't decide who sits in what room. It's a public meeting, and everyone from the public is welcome. That's according to the moderator.
Yep. I know the moderator's control, and I brought this up the meeting before, way back, I think.
Right. He said we couldn't do that. He said we could not say, are you a voter or not, and tell you where to sit. And some of the people that sat in the bleachers chose to, and they liked having the more space.
But I don't think, well, I talked to other people, and they were upset about it, and I think they were rightly so. I don't think it was right, and the moderator, I know, I checked with the Attorney General's office. The moderator controls the meeting, and he has the right to do it. But I thought we were going to write a letter to him, asking him. I understood that at the meeting before.
We did discuss it.
And he denied it. He has the right to deny it.
Right.
So as long as we have an answer for the people why it was that way, it's the moderator. It's his decision.
It's his meeting, and
Yeah, that's right.
it's his rules, and we follow his rules.
Right, not,
We did discuss it with him in advance. We didn't write a letter. We talked to him on the phone.
okay, yeah, okay, you did, huh?
And his position was you can't segregate
I,
the groups.
you can, actually, I know, because I've been there, I know you can.
I'm just telling
He
you.
has the right
I'm
to,
reporting
he has
you
the
what
right
he
to
said.
do it, but it's not against the law by any stretch of the imagination.
But I did appreciate the questions that you asked at the last meeting, because that gave us all of the information in advance to make sure we did check it out with him. And
good.
we also, according to your request, when we when we sent the notices out to the supervisors of the checklist, we reminded them of the statute that said that they should retain those checklists, and we put that in writing to them. for 7 years, and we asked the moderator to remind them as well. So that was really good forward thinking on the part of the board, and we listened to everything you said, and we did discuss it in advance with him.
It went off very good. It was very good.
Anything else, Mr. Belbin?
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Migliori?
I thought it was very well handled. I think we handled logistically as best we could under the circumstances. Another well-run meeting by Judge Gordon. And I also think that under other business or under action items, I'd like to make a motion that when we do this, to make sure that we hold next year's deliberative session on a Saturday morning again, with a snow date on a Saturday morning again, and to include good weather.
Mr. Guido?
At the risk of being boring, I was thrilled with the number of people who were there, and also with the quality and the politeness of the discussion.
Yes.
People were able to be direct without
Yes.
being inflammatory. I thought the mailing was very useful, despite the fact that every Groton resident who gets their mail through the Rumney
Rumney.
Post Office didn't
get
get
it.
a mailing because it says Rumney instead of Groton. So
Right.
if they could fix that next year, we'll be very happy.
Thank you. Sue?
Well, speaking of that, I know a couple of people with P.O. boxes in Bristol that didn't get the mailing. Did it not go to P.O. boxes?
We did send it to P.O. boxes,
Did.
so.
Oh, they could have lost them.
Some in Bridgewater didn't get it in, they have asphalt that way.
Bridgewater goes to Plymouth. None of them goes.
So we need to add the, I don't know, we contacted, Dan actually
It was
contacted
done through the post
the
office.
post office, and,
Calculated, gave us a calculation of how to
Yeah.
format so that each residential,
each zone,
each residential address
yeah.
or delivery station, if you will, would get one.
But we can check to see if we can catch some more of the Bridgewater people with Plymouth.
No, we'll have to talk to,
Yeah.
we'll have to add that into the equation.
But thank you. So you said people on River Road?
Nobody on River got a
Okay.
mailing.
Well, I'm trying to find out what we missed. So we missed River Road?
I think we just need to go to the Rumney Post Office and say, how many do you need
Right.
for Groton? And we need to go to the Plymouth Post Office and say, how many do you need
Yep.
for Bridgewater?
Yep.
And that should be the
And-
capture, right?
Some
You
of
also have
Bridgewater
Hill.
have
Hill.
Ashland zip codes instead of Plymouth?
That side of town has, I don't know exactly the cutoff on Dick Brown Road, but it goes from there down to the town line. That's all delivered by the Plymouth, the wacky
Mr.
system.
Huckins, what is your zip code?
03264.
Your Plymouth, okay. But he lives in Bridgewater. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and some of the Alexandria people have a Hill post office, I mean, a Hill address.
What
If
about
they're-
Danbury? Does Danbury have another zip code? Okay. Is it about this topic, Ms. Cody?
Yes. I'm a Bristol resident and did not get it either, and I know of quite a few that did not get it in Bristol, and they're not post office boxes either, so.
Well, we have, what we did was we received routing numbers from the Postmaster General in Maine, and we were instructed to bundle them in bundles of 50 with a routing number labeled on each one. So we did everything that she emailed us with all the
I
routing numbers, and
I understand that, but
Yeah.
just because you paid for it, you should be able to let the post office know that everybody did not get it, that were in those categories that you gave.
so I wondered where they went.
You picked the model up, you paid for it.
Right. Thank you. Anything else about the first deliberative session from the board? Mr. Migliori?
Two other points. The other half of this is the voting that comes up in March. And it was brought to my attention today that we need to get final ballots resolved so that absentee voting
Those are being,
can take place.
yep, Sue's run them off, we're folding them, we're delivering them.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's under control. Okay. The only other comment is on the checklist matter. There is still disagreement in New Hampton as to whether or not the checklist needs to be kept or not.
I heard the moderator say it loud and clear, and I even wrote it down.
He did say, and I took particular note to hearing the detail, that the checklist will be retained for the period according to law.
Right. That's what I heard. Checklist will be held for
That's
a period of time required by law.
Right. I have a letter in writing that says that New Hampton doesn't agree with that. So I'd be pursuing that, just FYI.
Mr. Reinhardt? Do you know anything about your town not wanting to do that?
Do you want to hang on to them for him?
I know nothing.
Sue, you're a supervisor
Well,
of the checklist.
I was going to say, the chair of our supervisors just happened to be down at the state and talked to the Secretary of State, and he printed him a few pages of the RSA that says how long things should be retained, and I believe it was 7 years on that one. But they definitely are supposed to be retained. They're mock checklists.
On the warrant are 2 petitioned articles that we are having public hearings this week and next. Tonight was Bristol, tomorrow night Danbury at 6 o'clock. Wednesday is Bridgewater at Bridgewater Hebron Village School at 4 p.m. Thursday night is Hebron at the town offices, the second floor, the former Hebron Village School. Saturday morning at 10 a.m. is New Hampton at the New Hampton Community School. And the following week on Thursday is Alexandria. Is that the old town hall?
Wow.
At 6:30?
Town hall refers to the town hall, and if you want it in the other building, you're supposed to say municipal building or annex. Municipal building, I think, is the name
So
for it.
which one did we
However,
reserve?
they're right next to each other, so I'm thinking if you don't see the lights on at one, you just go to the next. They're just-
And the last one is Saturday, February 25th in Groton at their town hall at 10 a.m.
Yeah, we only have one.
Yes. And I would encourage board members to attend at least the hearing in your town. I know that Mr. Leato has another commitment on February 25th, and I know that Sue will be attending. I am planning to attend all 7 hearings. So we invite people to come to that. Item C on your agenda is plan for adding 5th grade to the middle school, and I believe Dr. Ross wanted to talk about that.
I requested that we put this on the agenda because when it was budget time and we were building the budget and we knew that the budget committee had a goal of $20 million, you asked us to come up with some scenarios, which we did. And I asked if the board would make a decision on the Danbury Elementary School, and the board made a decision not to close that school, and you directed me to find the dollars somewhere else, in which we did. I asked if the board wanted to make a stand on, do you want me to move the 5th grade to the middle school or not? And I believe there wasn't any motion that was made one way or another to that effect. So it is my job as superintendent to guarantee, as much as anyone can guarantee, that we will offer the highest quality education as we can in any configuration of grade levels. And I believe it's the board's job to be setting policy, and I think a grade configuration change would be somewhat of a policy stand. So I'm hopeful that we've received a lot of feedback. We've heard a lot of testimony from a lot of parents and from some community members that they would not favor that configuration. So I was hopeful that we could put it on tonight's agenda. And the bottom line is the bottom line, and it's only going to differ from the default by $100,000. So we've heard many parents say, don't wait until after March 13th to start a transition program if you are going to move the students to the middle school. So I was hopeful that the board would have a deliberation and a discussion tonight, and that they would give Dan and me some direction as to where you ultimately want to go with this, because we would like to put a plan in place, and if the board's decision is to have a grade configuration of 5 through 8 in the middle school, then I would want to set up a transition team and request for some parent volunteers to help to listen to concerns and make that transition as smooth as possible. If the board says, We want to discuss other areas in the budget, and it's clear that the voters did not want to increase the amount of $250,000 to make this transition plan. Then we would have to look at, you do have the authority, the unfettered authority to move dollars from one line item to another. Also, when we were creating the budget, we did not know that we were going to have 2 petition warrant articles to do feasibility studies. And I don't think it's a really solid idea to move the kids one year and move them back another year. The feasibility studies, I don't know which way they're going to go. We have no building aid at the state level this year. I don't believe that we have any building aid coming our way for a while. I don't know. I know our schools currently could not accommodate a K-6 or a K-8 configuration without some building alterations, but that's a big conversation, and I just wanted to put it on the agenda and just sit back and let the board have that conversation, and then Dan and I are here to take your direction at the end of your conversation.
Thanks.
So converse. Board have anything to say on this topic? Mr. Leota?
You can tell I abhor silence.
I had my hand up.
Did you?
Yes.
You need a bigger hand.
I've been calling on him before you several times tonight, so I figured I'd let you.
Well, that's
I mean, the hands seem to be at the same time.
In any case, it's deja vu all over again. 100 years ago, when my son was in this position, the school district he was in, very similar to this one, had precisely the same dilemma. In that case, it was to move the children into the high school and not the middle school, because there wasn't a middle school. And there were keenly felt emotions on both sides of the equation. And none of them were unreasonable, but they were different. The net fact is we did move the children, and we did so with some considerable degree of care, and that is the configuration that still persists. So I came away from that saying it could be done well. No doubt it can be done poorly, but it could be done well and successfully. And in that case, the change was more extreme because they were actually going into a high school building. And I heard Marie say on several occasions that from an educational standpoint, and I don't know how to define that, but the whole picture was this isn't done at the expense of the students in order to save $1, but that there are some benefits to this that are net positive. I'm sure there's diversity of opinion there. But I, for one, land on the side of saying, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. It's a reasonable thing that can be done well if we try hard to do it well. And I'd like to see us try and do it.
Yes, I would like at some point to hear from the public that's in attendance this evening on this topic, and perhaps continue to discuss it after that, if you would, Madam Chair. The other point I wanted to make is I heard loudly and clearly that this is not a good idea and that parents are not in favor of doing it. And if you look a couple steps ahead, we probably shouldn't make any decision on this until we know what the outcome of the planning articles are. Because those articles, I think, came about as a result of the $20 million number and what then ensued, which was to close Danbury and make some big changes and major staffing, what have you. And that was the genesis of creating an idea to consider elementary schools of K-8 in each of the towns with elementary schools. There seems to be some interest in that for purposes of controlling those towns' educational fates from grades K-8. So if those articles were to pass, then we would have a task to perform to do the evaluation, come up with a solution that would also include, and I'm looking for some guidance on this from those in the know, if we went ahead and did a K through 8 solution in each of the 4 towns, wouldn't we need to start fresh in terms of collective bargaining agreements from the get-go? So in other words,
You have totally separate districts.
okay, you'd have the high school as a cooperative district, but we still would start with a new collective bargaining agreement because it would be changed, correct? Okay. So there's some overall benefit to the issue of waiting to see what the outcome is on the vote and then what we come up with in terms of a task, the force result to do any implementation, or what we may discover that may preclude the ability to do that withdrawal on each of the towns that are involved, or 1 or 2 of the towns. I don't know. For that reason, it's probably going to be prudent for us certainly to wait. However, we still have to do something with the numbers that we have, and to that end, is it precisely $250,000 that it would cost to make this change and go forward with?
We made the estimate of 2.3 full-time equivalent positions, which I've defined as 1 fifth-grade position that we would have to have 2 of them with a population of 34 students in the Bridgewater Hebron Village School. 1 ICT teacher, which we said if we had 100 fewer children at the elementary level to service, we could service the 4 elementary schools of K through 4 with 2 full-time adults instead of 3. And the third 3/10 of a position was the instrumental music teacher that would be unnecessary if the 5th graders were part of the instrumental music lessons at the high school. So Dan did an estimate of all of the related costs, retirement, health insurance, benefits, et cetera, and we came up with about $250,000 estimate.
Okay. So given the topic and the discussion, and again, I'd like to get some public input this evening as well as further commentary from the board members. The direction that the district's going in now may cause some people to do homeschooling and reduce our student population, or make some changes with respect to just moving right out of the district. There's a whole bunch of things that could happen here, including if we were to go ahead as a board and support making the move with the 5th grade, as was in the planned budget to do so. The other side of that coin is, and it never came up from my perspective at the time, but is there a reason why we didn't focus on riffing additional support people in lieu of the teachers, or in addition to the teachers?
When we talked about support staff, first of all, the number of people that we need is dictated currently by the number of IEPs. So what we did was we went through and we said, how many students need to have a one-on-one, how many students need to share a two-on-one, et cetera. And then when we looked at, can we reduce any academic interventionists, these are the tutors that we've been talking about, if we felt have helped to improve our NECAP scores. Some of the people that are in the budget gross number are federally funded, and the funding can only be used for additional services that the district is not required to support. So the reason that we have some of the support staff still in there is because they're federally funded. And Title I says you cannot supplant a district obligation. So we couldn't use the money to pay for something that the district should be paying for. We have to add additional tutoring with that money. So again, you know, we've been doing I hope that you appreciate that in Judy Turk's report every month. She said, here's the number of students we've discharged from special ed, here's the number of students that we've brought back from out of district placement. We're trying every way we can to have as effective a model as we can. At the high school, we've put an alternative lab in where we've got some students where we can counsel into doing some computer courses that are less dependent on direct instruction. So we're continuing all the time to try to get the number of support staff minimized, but to just cut people that we know by law were required to provide special education services at this point, that's why we didn't cut more.
Okay. Well, in looking at the data, by comparison, we have the second best or worst ratio, depending on your perspective, of 8.52 students to every one support staff person. We have 155 support staff in the district. And the only district that has more than that has a substantial number more. I don't know why, but it's 250 in Litchfield.
Well, I think Fred also
Read that.
addressed that. I think Fred also addressed that at the deliberative session when he talked about the idea that having 4 separate buildings, that is more school secretaries, that is more custodial staff, that is more food service staff. So I think that when you say support staff in the district data comparison analysis,
Yeah.
that includes all of our support staff. They're not broken out by paraprofessionals that are assisting students. And there are, I know Dan has in the past.
Litchfield only has 3 buildings, and we have 6.
Mhm.
So I don't know why that number would be so out of line. My point is, though, that of all the other districts, the support staff numbers aren't really close to us. Guilford has 96, Bow has 103, Scenic has 84, Mascoma has 104, and Shaker Valley has 106. And that's true of from 2010 backwards 5 years as well. I looked at that data to see that it didn't vary very much.
Again, they have, Guilford has 1 elementary, I mean, they don't have as many buildings. We have reduced in support staff, for example, we have reduced a secretarial position to half-time in our smallest school. We have, Dan has got some shared positions for custodial workers that aren't, you have some part-time people. We're trying to whittle that down where we can and still maintain.
But how is it that we have such a grossly higher number than those other districts?
Do any of those districts contract out their food services?
Messinic does.
I don't know the answer to that.
Messinic does.
I know that Woodisquam
So that-
does
that-
all its facility staff, so they don't have numbers for facility.
So they don't
people.
count those in there that we would.
Well,
And
again,
those figures are 2 years old, and we have been cutting staff for the last 2 or 3 budget cycles.
okay, hold on. That's fine, and if that's correct, then what is the current number compared to the other districts? Because the 5 years prior has all been consistent in that we're up there in the number 2 position, support staff-wise. Now, we made that evaluation across the board evenly with the other districts. So what constitutes the need for NASD to have roughly 40 to 50 more support people when our special ed population is relatively similar?
Well, as I said, number of buildings,
But
outsourcing,
Litchfield has 3.
outsourcing food service, we have 6. We have 6 buildings. We have a school secretary in each one.
May I interject just for a minute? I think we can agree, since you've already said it, Litchfield is an anomaly. We don't know why they are what they are. So the appropriate comparisons would be to those who have numbers that are lower than ours. And
Okay, well, Messinic and Mascoma are listed at 5 each, and they're 84 and 104.
Mascoma
5
has
each are
2
the buildings,
schools, 3
Yeah,
schools.
let me just double check that.
because Messinic is no longer 5, but
Right,
that's not
so
what the
there-
data
That's
is
one
based on.
elementary school.
Right. Again, I'm going by the comparison.
Sure,
that
sure.
We did.
So Vinnie, I think I hear
White
your
Mountain is
question on,
5 as well.
I think I hear you saying to me, can we cut more support staff? Is what I'm hearing you say.
That's my question,
We
because we
can-
need to come up with $250,000, right?
We may need to come up with $250,000.
Well, in order to address the 5th grade, not changing the 5th grade, primarily for reasons in my mind, if we're going to do a study to go to K through 8 and make that choice, maybe we should wait another year before we do that.
Mr. Reinhardt?
And there, I believe there's other ways to maybe come up with this money. Dan, the Honeywell project, that's in the budget.
Yeah,
How much of that do we get back via grants?
nothing. I don't understand your question.
The payments on the Honeywell project.
The revenues and the costs are all in the budget.
He already put those in.
The revenues are in there too?
Sure. Building aid revenue and the.
I didn't know the revenue was in there.
Can I make one
Yes.
observation? And this is, the studies that are being contemplated would take years to implement. I just want you guys, I mean, just speaking with my fellow business administrators about how long studies like this take to, well, complete and then act upon and then see results if a decision is made. You're talking, I mean, years, yeah, at least.
And there's no building aid right now, so even if there were any.
Even if there were building aid, and if the tax cut goes in, if the tax cap goes in, excuse me, that would affect any contemplated debt service as well. So if you had any new debt service for any expansion projects, or anything like that.
Before you came in, Archie and I covered that.
I apologize for being late.
About it, but the point is, there's more physical space in all of the 6 buildings that we have now than we would need. And I believe
Not
in the,
Danbury.
I believe in the middle school, there is room to just do segregation. And then here in the high school, there's, the idea was to separate to a junior high wing.
The two
in one of the articles?
The two
Yeah, but there was
feasibility
building
studies,
construction
Vinnie,
in that
the two
article.
feasibility studies, one says build an additional 7-8 space onto the high school.
Yeah.
And then take the current middle school, relocate the Bristol Elementary School into that school. So that could accommodate a grade span improvement. Bridgewater Hebron right now has already lost their teacher room and their speech, language, and OT room to classrooms because they're at capacity in the K through 5 now. So they'd have to expand to add a 6th grade or up through 8th grade. And then the New Hampton school is at capacity now in the K through 5, so they don't have room for a K through 6
Okay,
either.
but when we were at 1,650 students, we weren't building a new school. We handled it.
Because of the grade level configurations, we had more kids in those grades. But to add in extra classrooms of different grades, like Danbury had a lot of multi-age classes, and with us going to a multi-age model of a 1-2, a 3-4, Danbury could accommodate a 5-6 if they did it as a multi-age currently. That's the only school that could accommodate that without building cost. I have a copy of a demographic study that was done by the Moulton Borough School District. It's really comprehensive, and we can talk about it at some planning and dialogue meeting, and not to use the time tonight. But their conclusion is, with declining enrollment, why would anybody be spending taxpayer dollars to build on more space in schools? We should be consolidating. Now, that's their,
Bless you.
that was their.
Do some warning next
With
time.
emphasis on the point.
Yeah, so their conclusion was that they are having conversations about consolidation. So I'm thinking that with declining student enrollment in a tough economy, I'm not thinking that bonds to increase and add on are going to pass easily.
Right, and
without building
I think
it.
that the discussion on those articles
Yeah.
is going to reveal that
Right.
these kinds of things are going to float to the
Right.
top. And more importantly, that, for example, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if, for example, Danbury wanted to do a K through 8, in order to accommodate that, they may have to factor in adding on to the Danbury school so that they can keep their school, have their own school board, make their own decisions, and guarantee that the cooperative school board is not going to threaten to take the school away from the town again. There are costs and trade-off involved there, in which case that physical plant would have to be expanded
Right.
to address it. You take the Bridgewater Hebron Village School and you change the configuration by not having the choice of the parents in the other cooperative district towns to be able to go there, and that releases the space constraint. and there's no need to build there.
I think we only have 14 students that have opted that.
Well, there's 14 fewer students in
Right,
that
right.
building, so, and then you've got the Bristol Elementary School and New Hampton, of course. All of those issues are going to cause a choice to be made as a result of the studies. And like when we did the healthcare evaluation stuff, it became readily apparent early on when you looked at the detail that it was either not going to be feasible to do this for very real practical reasons, or we could continue to pursue it and go forward with some ideals that, like the healthcare decision that's being pursued by a superintendent up north, is still going to take years to implement.
Right.
So there's the practicality of that, and it's kind of down the road a little bit, and that brings us full circle back to how do we get to keeping the 5th grade as it is.
Well, but no, that, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
wait a minute, Mr.
I'm
Belbin has been waiting.
Yeah, sure.
Gentlemen, if I may slow you down. You know, we're not addressing the problem at hand, we're going way off, going ahead of ourselves. And I think we need to address the problem at hand here. We have a problem about the 5th grade, and we're going off the stuff that we don't even know what's gonna happen. You're going way off on these, all these articles passing, and some of them may require a change in the charter and everything else. So I think we're going way off the deep end here. Let's address the problem at hand and work on it. We've got enough work to do with that without going way off. It's 5 years, like Dan said. That's my opinion on it.
Mr. Leoto?
Well, here's a proposal. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's concurrence that if those proposals, if those warrant articles pass, the accomplishment of the study itself and the implementation will take many years, 4 or 5, maybe 6. Were we to have moved the 5th grade today, that would give it a 5-year tenure, not a 1-year tenure. You wouldn't have to undo it the next year. So in point of fact, that is not an unreasonable thing for us to do, given that all of those things would happen, that the warrant articles would pass, that the proposals would be made that would actually float, and that we would implement those proposals. There's pretty long odds against that. But under those circumstances, the worst possible scenario is the 5th grade gets reconfigured 5 years from now. I don't think that represents a real quandary, a real stress on the 5th graders. One of the things I'd like to try and focus the discussion on, we are here because of budgetary issues, fair enough. But I'd like the discussion to focus as much as it can on the advantages and disadvantages from an educational standpoint to the 5th grade. I think that should drive the decision every bit as much or more than the number of dollars it costs. And I'd like to hear, as a part of an ongoing discussion, what are the pluses and minuses? I don't necessarily mean what does an individual parent feel, because I'm going to hear that. We are going to hear that, and those things are valid input. But I'd also like to hear what the educational pluses and minuses are.
I think the superintendent could answer that.
Mr. Reinhardt?
I don't believe you were there. The budget committee had all the principals in and discussed this matter,
I was not there.
okay? And none of them thought there was a real problem. Preference, they'd like to keep their 5th graders only because they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But they said as far as injuring the child's education or their ability to get along with other students, they didn't see a problem. So I don't know if we're kicking a dead horse here or what. I mean, if it doesn't work, you fix it. But it may be one of the best things. There are some things listed that would be advantage to it, like more art, more music, more cultural things. So, I mean, I don't understand. I went to kindergarten through 8th grade school when I made it. Here I am. But
Congratulations.
You don't leave yourself that wide open.
It was unmerited.
it was. Not because of the 8th graders. But, I mean, if you're asking me, I don't see a problem with it. But, I mean, I know there's some people unhappy with it, but life is not all roses.
Mr. Belvin?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Superintendent, physically, plant-wise, there's no problem, right? On the physical plant, you mentioned that there's no problem as far as that. I don't know if we had to go look at it and see what you had laid out or what.
Well, I called the Department of Ed. Again, it's my job to get all the facts, and it's your job to make the decision. So I just wanted to make sure that I was well prepared with the reality. So I called the Department of Education and I said, do we need to get special permission to change the configuration? And they said, no, just report if you make a change, let us know. I called and I said, does this affect Title I percentages? Because we have percentages by the elementary school that determines who qualifies for Title I services or not. And they said, our rule generally is that percentages tend to be similar, so we'll let you use the percentages for the year of transition if that's the case. I made a statement that I said I needed to check to be absolutely certain that I thought there were about 21 schools in the state. Currently there are 15, so I'll apologize. The 21 I got from an old Department of Ed report, and on the updated school this year. And some of these schools are at the top of the state performance-wise because they're in Amherst or whatever. So Amherst Middle School is a 5 through 8. Barrington Middle School is a 5 through 8. Belmont Middle School is a 5 through 8. Franklin Middle School is a 5 through 8. Guilford is a 5 through 8. Great Brook School is in Antrim, New Hampshire. That's a 5 through 8. Hampstead, 5 through 8. Iber-Holmes-Gove Middle School is in Raymond. Indian River School in Canaan. Interlakes has a middle tier, but they have a K through 6 and a 7 through 12, but they treat their 5 through 8 as a middle tier for their scores and reporting and things, but they are housed in separate buildings. Litchfield's 5 through 8, Oyster River, Three Rivers in Pembroke, Velas Elementary School in Alstead, and Ware Middle School. So those are the current schools around the state. I also looked online and found an article. You can find articles to support anything in the world. And in Cincinnati, they were thinking about, they wanted to move away from isolating their 7 and 8. And they looked through all kinds of stuff. And they said, well, 7 through 12s work better this way, and K through 8s work better this way. And they basically said, the most important factor is whether teaching methods are geared to that group. And they sought the group of 5 through 9. And we said, we don't believe there is any one grade configuration that's better than another. And I guess I would hold to that. There are wonderful schools doing wonderful things, but this is a community decision. You represent the community, and there's a lot of community reasons why people would like to keep their kids in their communities. So I'm not going to say that there's an advantage one way or another that outweighs another. There's cost savings, slight, $250,000. That seems more than slight to me when I'm trying to find it. There are advantages, as you said, to having the number of allied arts. I believe that we've got a good plan for safety reasons to have the students isolated as well as we can. I think there's a huge fear factor, fear of the unknown. There's a different culture. I attended a K through 8 myself, and we had 1 through 4 on one floor and 5 through 8 on the next floor. 5 and 6, there was 2 5th and 2 6th grades that rotated, and 2 7ths and 2 8ths that rotated. But I mean, there's a lot of different models out there, so I wouldn't say that I would vote one way or another to say there's a superior academic model. I will stand behind the quality of preparation and dedication and education for all our teachers wherever they are. And especially, I think our middle school, I don't want people to say, I think there's a lot of legend and lore around here about the way the middle school used to be years ago. And I have, for the board, which I'll pass out at the end of the meeting confidential, you've asked me to give you police reports. We've had no issues with violence. I think we've had one or two minor investigations as far as any kind of smoking issues, etc. I know with some people here in the audience that work at the middle school, and they could attest to the culture and the climate. And we're going to have a kid. The thing I'm thinking about is these 8th graders were the reading buddies for the kids when they were 1st first grade buddies, or fourth grade, first grade, fifth grade, second grade buddies, and they're the same kids. They've aged up. Now they're a little bit older, and yes, they change when they get into the middle school, but again, I wouldn't say that there's any huge disadvantage academically or huge advantage academically. I'm just trying to make the budget work for your direction.
Mr. Migliori?
Yes, a couple of points. Lou asked for the educational reasons why this was a good thing to do. Perhaps we should discuss that at some point. However, I don't agree that it, at least at this juncture, that it's going to take 5 years to implement the articles if they pass the way they're constructed presently. It's likely that they'll take a long time. It's also likely that some of the other towns will move forward and try to pull from the district. I've been given that feedback. I don't want to come to the conclusion on the articles, A, whether they're going to pass or not, or B, how long they'll take, until we have to go through them and decide what are the logistics of this and come to a reasonable conclusion based on data. It may very well take 5 years. I don't think they're intended to take long at all, with the exception of the building comment. The other thing is, there are contingencies in the budget, not big ones, but they're there. And I would contend that this year, we're going to be giving money back, just as we have in the past, to the tune of $350,000, $650,000. I think one year it was $900,000. So our record of giving back money has been stellar. Through this year, through attrition, because of the change in benefit structure, I expect that some people are going to leave the district because they have to have benefits paid for. As a result of that, I predict that even with this austere budget, we are very likely going to be able to give back money. For that reason, we may be able to come up with $250,000, if that's the number, to leave things as they are for the 5th grade. If not, I'd like to more closely examine the extensive difference in our support staff structure compared to the other districts and see what we can do to come up with the money as a potential possibility. And again, there's quite a bit of people here in the public, and I would like to hear their opinion at some point soon on what we've discussed thus far. But I defer to your judgment on that, Madam Chair.
Well, there's another public comments section, and we just have field trips once you finish discussing this plan. And I don't know if anybody has other business items. Sue?
Well, getting back to when we first discussed this, when we were making the budget, okay, I don't really favor moving all the 5th graders to the middle school. I'd like to keep them in their community schools. The reason that I didn't object to it was because I thought that instead of saving money, that if anything we saved by moving that 5th grade to the middle school, that perhaps that could be applied toward the huge blow that the health insurance change is going to put upon our support staff, 84 of our support staff. And it is going to be unbearable for some of them. And I would say that anything that we could save anywhere should go toward that. And I know that there was a vote at deliberative session, and it was, there were 10 votes difference, and a couple of comments were made about the fact that they would have voted for it, but they weren't sure, they weren't guaranteed that the money would be put toward that. And that was the reason why some of the people did not vote for that.
That was on the amendment to increase
The
by
amendment.
$350,000 regarding the health insurance.
Yes. So I would rather try to do this and do it well. And there's a lot less damage in it, I think, than the damage that's going to be done to a lot of our support staff with this health insurance change. So that's my opinion. Also, I had a few questions, too. I think it was I was told that recess would still be available for the fifth graders. Okay. Lunches, there are 3 lunches over there, I'm told, 1 for each grade now. How would that be arranged? Maybe you haven't gone there yet, but it's just a question.
So Eric would
So you'd
schedule
have to
a
mix
separate
some
lunch.
of the grades, or you'd have to have a fourth lunch?
No, he'd have
or
to add a fourth lunch.
You could do a fourth lunch?
We do 4 at the high school right now.
Yeah. I was told gym, they'll have it every other day, but it's only for a third of the
Right.
year. To me, that's a step backward.
They'd have 28 hours a year. Right now, they get 27 hours a year,
Yeah.
but they would have it every other
But
day
it would
for
only
a
be
third
for a
of the year.
third of the
Right, right.
year, so that's
Right.
not a good thing. That's a step backward in an area that we should be going forward in.
To Paul.
Because we all did it at the same time. And I would second your amendment.
The original motion was made by Lloyd, seconded by Paul. The amendment is made by Lou, seconded by Sue. So we're discussing the amendment now to authorize Dan to replace fuel to reflect best estimate of fuel. And he gave us some numbers that are essentially carrying over from the proposed budget V3. So, discussion on that, are you waiting for Dan to give you a number?
20, It's, as you said, it's up about $37,000. So the new total for all funds. $21,700,092.
But I would argue that the different areas that have contributed to the increase of approximately $100,000 over the school board's approved budget are legitimate and not game playing. They are the kinds of things that I think Mr. Osha referred to when he talked about legitimate expenses that you have every right to expect to
Right.
incur.
Any further comments on the amendment? And you know what the bottom line's changed if you approve the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment only authorizing Dan to replace fuel to reflect best estimates of fuel, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstentions. Okay, so I think I have 5 in favor, 2 opposed. Is that correct? I heard no abstentions. The 2 opposed would be Bristol and Groton.
No.
Still New Hampton.
Oh, New Hampton. Sorry. I knew that didn't make any sense the minute I said it. Okay, so 5 in favor, 2 Bristol and New Hampton opposed, and the amendment passes. So now you're back to the original motion, which is to adopt the V1A default, which is now amended to be a bottom line of $21,700,092. Further discussion on the main motion as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
Nah.
Abstentions. So I have 5, 2, 0, 0 with Bridgewater and New Hampton voting in the minority. Warrant articles, when you turn over your agenda, the board has not added any. There are now 3 petitioned articles, which will be Articles 3, 4, and 5. There's a possibility of another 1 or 2 coming in tomorrow afternoon. I encourage the petitioners of all of these articles to be present at the budget hearing as well as the deliberative session and be prepared to give at least some opening remarks about it. That would be very helpful, I think, to all of us. And you have a schedule about public hearings, and the superintendent is going to check to see if we are required to have them on the other petitioned articles. The budget hearing on Wednesday night will be videotaped, and the first deliberative session on February 4th will also be videotaped. And you had in your packet latest student numbers for the district. Under other business, Mr. Belbin had a motion that he wanted to make about sending some kind of document out before deliberative session, I believe, but do you have the wording of your motion, Mr. Belbin?
And that all the registered voters in the district receive mail notification of the meeting. Not businesses, just private, just residential, not businesses.
So you said just registered voters, not all residents?
Residents, I'm sorry, residents, because we don't know what they are. All residents, not business.
But you said registered voters.
I know it, but we don't know.
Doesn't that
That's why I changed it to all
residents?
in the district.
All residents?
Yeah, residences,
That's the number Dan gave
DENCES.
you.
Residences.
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 Per the post office, yeah.
How,
If they can't vote,
how will we
I'm out.
separate the businesses?
Well, the post office, they gave us a
We got
printout,
Dan's
and
got that.
they were telling us how many businesses. So he asked me if Dan got it too, but if we just wanted the residences, and
So
gave me
for my
a...
clarification, you're referring back to the email that the post office sent me with the details of by zip code, how many residential addresses there are and how many business addresses there are for total deliveries. We just want to provide enough copies and postage to the post office to send whatever document you now discuss to the number of deliveries that are identified in the column titled residential.
That's right,
I understand.
yeah.
Okay, so you want to send to all residences per the post office definition of residential. But what is it that you want to send?
I'll give you people one copy now to go over, if I may. This is just a rough draft, so you can just see what I was talking. These figures may be a little off, Dan, I'll have to go over them if we decide on this.
One for you,
Got enough? I got enough one for Dan?
for you.
Ooh, I don't think we can do this, Lloyd.
Huh?
We can't do this.
Why?
Do you have any extra?
The way this is worded, it says, at this meeting you will be asked to vote on the above budgets, or any amount put forth from the floor. Last year, the budget was increased by $900,000 by a motion from the floor. If you plan to cut the tax bill, be there. That's promoting a political viewpoint to cut. So that's illegal.
I'm trying to get interest to get the people there.
Yeah, that's electioneering because you can't,
Right.
I can't use, you can, I can't send out using district resources to promote a particular viewpoint. We very
We just have
well,
to cut out that, if you plan to cut your
right,
tax
and
bill, be
so what I would propose to do is that we definitely will, I can either just do a flyer, or I don't think it costs us more to do, like I said, a fold-out newsletter with explanations, with details of each of the
Well, I
warrant
think we need a
articles in
vote.
addition.
But I think we need to vote right now what we're gonna put in this thing before we mail it out, and that's what I wanna know.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna leave it to the superintendent to put out, we want the board to know what we're putting out there. No offense.
Well, I
If we have to
object to
change
the
this,
way
we'll
that
change
you've
it.
written
No,
the
that-
bottom
I
part.
understand that, it's just a rough draft, and, I'll make mistakes.
So-
But I didn't know, if we just took, if you plan to cut your tax bill, be there, will that, can that come
Well,
off?
the
and
flip
do it?
side of that could be, we could just add another sentence that says, if you plan to increase your tax bill, be there.
Either way.
Equal time, right?
So,
Well, I hate to recommend this specific thing, and as you say, it's a rough draft, when I think that there are some things that could be added, such as the explanations of the warrant articles.
Right.
So
Well, I meant this would say you
would
can put
not be
flyers
the
in it with it,
final
because you
thing.
said they could put 3
Would
pages.
you like me to prepare a draft that I can bring on Wednesday night to the budget hearing for you to review and approve at that point? That
Well, I think the
we can
board
have-
should vote on all of them, have
That's
to
what,
approve.
I think that's what she meant.
I like
She
that.
meant us collectively.
Right, that I would put together a draft that I know is going to have the correct amounts on
Yeah, the
there.
amounts are,
Right.
off a little bit, we kept changing them, so I know.
And any warrant articles that we have, because I'll know that by then, and I can give you a rough draft, so you can look, and the board can say, yeah, this is what we want, or no, it isn't what we want. You can just direct me.
So I just want to get something to get the people,
So if you make a motion that says that you direct me to develop a flyer to be sent to all residents that are in residential, not business, to be approved by the board on January 11th.
Yeah, it should explain the procedure,
Right,
I
right,
think.
Yeah.
Mr. Migliore?
Well, how can we legally conduct that business if we don't post the meeting for that and review it as a group?
Well, I think
If
that
you
is
direct
possible.
me tonight to say
Well,
that,
wait, I'm not finished.
oh, okay.
Versus waiting until the planning and dialogue where perhaps we could take that up, but it'd be too late.
Too late, we
It'll
gotta
be
get
too
this
late.
mailed
We
out by
need to
the...
get it out before the 22nd.
Isn't
Right.
the budget hearing Wednesday posted as, is it posted that the board will be there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I'm
it
trying to
doesn't
get
post that you
there.
have official business that night. And again, if you don't consider it official business, but that we have an agreement tonight, that I will show it to you for suggestions and edits on Wednesday night. You've made the motion that you'll make suggestions and edits Wednesday night, and that's the official vote, and then,
You think that's legal to do?
How much we gotta change it?
I-
Well, we
think
have to have a
it's
quorum of the
reasonable.
school board present at the budget
Yeah,
hearing
we
to
might
make
just
it
vote for the
a
correction, we'll get
legal
nothing
hearing,
out.
even though it's the school budget committee's hearing.
Yeah.
And this has been created and posted and distributed to both bodies, and
We can tear this apart in a couple of minutes between us and make something up, I think, between us and
but I'm
give it to
saying,
the-
Lloyd, we can put a whole, for the same price to mail out,
Yeah.
we can put a lot more information than
Right.
just the
and
notice.
that's what Vincent Paul's been
Right.
talking about, and that's sort of
That's
what I
what-
envisioned we were going to be
Well, I don't
sending
know,
out.
sometimes you put too much out and you kill the whole intent, that's my feeling.
Well, that's
I don't-
why,
I don't-
again,
I think if you hit the facts, how much the budget is, how much it's gonna cost and so forth, and they know.
Mr. Leato?
I think an important fly in the ointment are the 2 new warrant articles and possibly a third one.
Or for,
Or fourth, and it would be really
Yeah.
remiss, and it would look terrible
Yeah.
if we put out a brochure or a document and left out some of those things. It would look like we're trying to play games. So
Yeah,
I would offer a motion to direct the superintendent to prepare a public release which includes all of the available warrant articles and a succinct discussion of the budgetary features, changes from previous years, those kinds of things that Lloyd has put here, and give it to us for our review and editing Wednesday night.
you don't have to have a motion on the final version if we just say in this motion that you'll have an opportunity to
do
edit
that.
it.
And
We'll
then also to go to the residential customers.
What do you do, just, I understand, and I'm not opposed to doing it that way because of the timing constraints, but what do you do in the case of disagreement, where you get a 4-3 vote saying, no, we don't want to do that, we want to do this? I mean, you can't have a vote, right?
If you vote,
Wednesday night, you could not.
you don't have to vote on, I've done this
I understand that.
in years
you
past,
can't
without
have-
any vote from the board. It is my job to communicate with the public what's going on. So I'm hearing you say that you'd like some input in that. You don't have to re-vote on the final thing. You can just offer edits and suggestions on it, and it's a friendly discussion.
Well, you could email us that before Wednesday.
I can email you a draft of it, and then you can come in
do
and,
not vote through email.
not to
One
vote.
other suggestion?
Yeah, I see you, Mr. Golden, just a minute.
We could post tomorrow morning that the school board's gonna meet for 5 minutes before the budget hearing to review the communication authorized tonight, because you only have to post 24 hours in advance.
And I would suggest to meet after the
And that way,
budget.
the action you take Wednesday is,
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be, copacetic here.
I knew you were going to say
I
that.
just don't know.
I knew you were going to use that word.
Mr. Golden, is it about this
Yeah,
topic?
Just a comment, you can either do it and suggesting, or if at the end of tonight's meeting, you could recess tonight's meeting instead of adjourning it. And you could continue it after the budget committee hearing is completed, in case there's a vote needed.
Thank you.
Okay, that's what we're gonna do. I make a motion.
All right, there was first a motion from Mr. Belbin that never received a
that's-
second. There's now a motion from Mr. Lieto that has not yet received a second. And his motion is to direct the superintendent prepare a public release on all warrant articles and to give it to us Wednesday night for review, which will then be sent to all residential addresses.
I'll second that.
Further discussion on that motion from Mr. Lieto, seconded by Paul.
Madam Chair, I may be out of order, but just a point of order on that. Mr. Belden says to send it out to every resident, but he won't let every resident in unless he's a registered voter. So where do we go from there? You're gonna have a riot at the school.
No, it wasn't let them in. Don't let them in to make sure we got room for everybody to fit in there, the resident. If they're not a resident, we're not saying they can't come in. We're just saying that we want the registered voters seated first. And that's all subject to the moderator.
That's going to be given to the moderator, the moderator's
You're denying
meeting.
the taxpayer his right. You're
They
denying.
have- Well, they have no vote. If we can't get the voters in there, we got nothing.
Taxpayers who are not registered voters do not get to vote in the district, whether it's your town or whether it's the district.
So to that end, I think that this newsletter, or this sending out, should include information on how to register.
You bet.
Well, they can if they live somewhere else.
No, if you're-
Could you stop for a second?
I think-
just have a clarification.
I think he's getting
The
it.
motion that you called here, was it for Lloyd's motion or for?
No, it's for Mr. Leoto moved and Mr. Reinhardt seconded to direct the superintendent to prepare a public release on all warrant articles, which will be given to us Wednesday night for review, to go to all residential addresses per the post office information that Dan had.
Okay, so we're not doing anything with Lloyd's original motion? Or is
Right,
that-
it wasn't seconded. Okay, further discussion on this motion now, which I think really includes what Lloyd wanted to do, but he may disagree with that.
Yeah, because he amended Lloyd's motion, so it includes what the content Lloyd wants.
Right. So, all those in favor of this motion to have the superintendent prepare a public release and have it go to residential addresses, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. I know you said aye before you yawned.
I did.
Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Sue, do we have any manifests?
Has anyone finished?
I haven't been up there for a couple of weeks.
I don't believe we do.
Okay. We have a memo here from Mr. Stamp, Max Stamp, was dated December 28th, and the topic is school district simplification. It was addressed to the superintendent, to myself, to Neil Martin, and to Fran Wendelbo, the chair of the school budget committee. And I had not planned a planning and dialogue meeting for January because I try not to get you out more than twice a month, and your twice would be tonight and the budget hearing. But if the board would like to have a planning and dialogue meeting on Monday, January 23rd, which was put on your agenda, this would be the topic. And I did mention to Mr. Stamp, as he was leaving tonight's meeting, that I was going to distribute his memo to the board tonight and ask them if they wanted to start such a discussion on January 23rd. So what is the pleasure of the board? Mr. Migliore?
Yes, I'd like to remind the board that we got a very detailed and thoughtful letter or email that was shared with the board from Ms. Ruby Hill in Danbury that is similar and along the same lines of the thinking.
About
The additional point of fact is that while the letter was anonymous, we got another piece of correspondence that one could interpret was similar in nature to talk about changing the way we're doing things. There are two, at least, maybe more, petition warrant articles, perhaps one specifically, that talks about changing things, or looking at changing things. So there seems to be a lot of interest in dealing with that topic. I would like to just kind of take these in order somehow or prioritize them, because we did say we would have a planning and dialogue meeting on the subject of Ms. Hill's content.
You suggested that. I don't know that the board agreed to that.
I believe Mary indicated that we could do that.
I said I was not opposed to having it as a topic at some point for a planning and dialogue meeting, and then I was questioned in an email about December, and I explained why there was not a planning and dialogue meeting in December.
Right, well,
And it was not my intention to have one in January, as I just stated, because you're out tonight and for the budget hearing.
Because we just received these warrant articles, which both request that we set up very comprehensive committees to have these conversations, should we defer the consolidation conversation until we, basically, the conversation is the structure of our school district and the format and et cetera. And that's the umbrella under which the Ruby Hill conversation, the Max Stamp request, the anonymous request, and it seems like since we have warrant articles anyway, they're very specific as to set up study committees to do that. So you could spend the evening of January 23rd talking about it, or we could wait to have this official committee who's going to spend a lot of time talking. It's just a thought I have.
actually, I think that's a good idea. In the event that the article passes at the deliberative session, then we would be essentially obligated to cover those topics. If the article does not pass,
Then
I
we
would
do it.
like to reserve the right, if you will, to propose that we have a P&D session to talk about these ideas, because they're very thoughtful,
Right.
incisive, and deserve some extra time.
Right. I totally agree. I
So-
think what the superintendent's suggesting is, I didn't know that these petitioned articles were coming in tonight, and
Probably the best
and there
way.
may be more tomorrow, which is fine. I do really encourage the people who sign the petitions to come and talk, to explain and start that dialogue. So I totally agree that I would prefer that we wait to see what the results of the petitioned articles are, to hear some information from the petitioners, and then certainly set up, if the articles pass, then as the superintendent says, we're going to be setting up committees to do a lot of work. And some of this, the superintendent had facilities planning committee when she first arrived a few years ago, looking at some things, and then it got put on a back burner for a lot of other reasons, so.
Plus the fact that you're going to have 7 meetings in 14 days in the middle of February as well, and with the number of meetings that you're having in January, would you get the citizens out to have, the conversations that you want to have? I mean, we've had conversations about these things before, but it seems like different groups of people are at the meetings at different times, and if it gets very official and we really publicize it well, we might get a better forum, is a thought that I have.
So, does the board want to have a planning and dialogue on January 23rd, or wait until after the results of the elections in March. You know,
I think it's a good idea to wait.
Yeah.
I do too. So,
So you just wiped out the January 3rd, 23rd meeting?
Vacation.
so
Sounds
strike
like-
January 23rd as a planning and dialogue meeting because we will be probably doing that starting after the March elections. And please check your calendars for these public hearings in early February, and please at least attend the one that is in your own town. So I have,
I move that we recess.
you
the
want to
time-
recess?
To the time specific, at the end of the budget hearing on January the 11th.
Seconded. I agreed with you with tonight.
What you want, you agree with that?
So do I have to post that or not?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is yes.
Bernie says no?
You don't have to post it because we haven't adjourned this meeting. It's a continuation.
So the people are at this, that are at this meeting know it, and it's a continuation, and so we don't have to repost it.
I don't think there's any liability to posting it, though.
You can double check that, but that's the way I've always operated, we've operated.
It's been moved and seconded to recess this meeting to a time certain, which is Wednesday, January 11th, at the end of the budget hearing.
Right.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Thank you all very much.